Hey guys, welcome to the Passive Investing Made Simple show. I'm your host, Whitney Elkins-Hutten, Director of Investor Education here at PassiveInvesting.com. And I'm so excited to have you here today. But before we get started with our very special guest, if this is your first time joining our show, we do this show live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, 3 p.m. Eastern. So you can learn about the ins and outs of passive investing and various financial strategies, as we're going to learn about today, and how to build your wealth and your portfolio. Anyways, so be sure to go to passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. Check out some of the freebies that I have for you there. You can also get access to my calendar if you want to talk about all things passive investing, as well as see our open deals. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and transition, I should say, to today's topic. We are going to be talking about how to set up your kids for investing success. And so this is a passion of mine. I'm going to start peppering in some of these topics. I know many of our listeners actually have kids. And so I'm super excited to bring on Maya Korbrick. Maya and I met at an investor con. She was one of the amazing speakers there. And whenever she wrapped up her talk, it was a complete chaos afterwards. I spent the rest of the conference trying to find her. And then the universe blessed us and we ended up in the same lift on the way back to the airport. Anyways, I had to share that story, Maya. I feel like it was just meant to be. Maya, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are with helping teach about education to children.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Whitney. Thank you for having me on here. And yes, I actually recall that story, how we met in a cab, basically to the airport, quite often. And I tell my friends and I'm like, this was just meant to be. So I'm really excited to be here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maya. I actually was born in Bosnia. I lived there until I was 15. And then the war happened and I immigrated with my parents and my brother and 2 suitcases and $50. And we didn't speak a word of English. We lived in government shelters, government housing. I had 2 part-time jobs when I was growing up. And, I kind of did the traditional route. Like I know we're talking about passive income here, but I was, I kind of did what my parents taught me to do. I did more of that active kind of income earning where, I went to school, I got good grades, I worked for like a good company, but I was actually really smart with my money. And my husband and I, even though we had $60,000 debt, we paid all that off, including our mortgage by the time I was 32. And at that time, our kids were ages 4 and 6. And I actually wanted to know, what are they going to learn in school when it comes to financial literacy? Because I'm a CPA and, I had some clients that were making lots of money, but they were struggling with money. They didn't know how to keep it, how to grow it. And because of that, I wanted to know, okay, how can I help my kids avoid that? And so I started looking into the school system. Unfortunately, it wasn't teaching much about money. And I started my own programs, and that was 11 years ago. And since then, I've been helping parents teach children about money. I have courses for kids as well. And so that's how I got here.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, such an amazing journey. And I hope we get to dive into various parts of it. So guys, if you are here live, I encourage you, go to the Q&A box and drop in your questions. We will have our traditional Ask Me Anything session after the podcast portion of today's webinar, but I would love to know what you are curious to ask about. What is your burning question? And maybe we can slide some of those in ahead of time. But let's start at the beginning. I love always just kind of like setting the stage. So what does investing with your kids look like? And why isn't it so important that they learn how to do this as early as possible?
Well, first of all, I'm sure that people have seen those graphics or diagrams online. It's like, oh, if you start investing early and if you invest a certain amount of money, this is how much you're going to have at the end. And then if you invest 10 years later, the same amount of money, you're going to have like a lot less. So obviously, the sooner we get our children to invest, the better off they will be, because the long time horizon that they have ahead of them, in addition to the compound interest, can do the heavy lifting of the wealth creation. So, I really try to encourage parents to start investing for their children as soon as they're born. And it doesn't need to be a lot of money. It could be $10 per week. Or, if your children get certain monetary gifts for their birthdays or christening or, Christmas, holidays, whatever, start investing that money for their future and don't touch it, right? Like just let that money accumulate, let that money work and earn you more money. When the kids are young, obviously when they're little, they don't really know anything about investing. You are doing the work for them. But my suggestion is usually as the kids get older, is to actually involve them in investing. So a lot of parents feel very uncomfortable when it comes to investing. So I usually tell them, this is a good opportunity for you to learn alongside them. But I like to introduce kids to investing by investing for them a small portion of their portfolio into companies that they know and understand. And the reason why I say small portion is because sometimes the companies that they know and understand may not necessarily be the best companies to invest in. But like we've invested in companies like Disney and Roblox. And by the way, this is not a suggestion for you to invest in any of those, but more so to show you that like right now, for example, Disney is losing money in our portfolio because we bought it when it was very high. And Roblox too. But they have actually been a great way for me, a great tool to teach my kids about investing, because every time Roblox or Disney was in the news, I would have discussions with my kids at dinner or like when we're driving to soccer practices. It's kind of like, hey, this is what they're saying about Disney today. What do you think that's going to do to the company? Because they understand how Disney makes money. So do you think the share price is going to go up? Do you think the share price is going to go down? And so we would have these discussions, and, kids are a lot more intelligent than, especially when it comes to stocks and companies, then, we give them credit and they want to know these things. And so once my kids understood that they can be not only consumers of these companies, like, buying Disney products, going to theme parks, they realized that they could be part owners. Then slowly we transitioned to investing into like index funds and ETFs and so on.
Oh, how interesting. Yeah, I remember growing up, and this is before everything was automated, right? Like none of this was online. And my dad set me down. He was like, okay, we're going to, I forget the dollar amount, like, $50. It was nothing nominal. And he was like, we're going to buy shares in a company that you want to. And he like laid out 5 companies. And I was like, I don't want to invest in Dr. Pepper. I want to invest in Coca-Cola. Like, let's do that. Because back then I was not the big health nut I am today. I drank tons of Coca-Cola growing up. And my dad was like, no, Dr. Pepper does better than Coca-Cola. And I'm like, I don't know what he was reading in the news, but I love the fact that you say, pick something small, something that they will watch, right? Because when my dad made that suggestion, hey, let's not do Dr. Pepper, or let's do Dr. Pepper over Coca-Cola, I immediately checked out. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, this is my dad investing the money. This isn't me. So I'm curious though. So that's taking funds that are coming in from outside sources, like birthdays, gifts, maybe, like you said, christenings, maybe like, setting aside like money that they might have already earned in another fashion. But like, what are some of your favorite tools to get kids to have that pot of money so they can invest? Like, how can you, I'm sure there's a whole on-ramp here that, parents can help.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, there's some steady money that, especially when they're very, very little, maybe ages 4 or 5, like some parents start thinking about giving them allowance. So I usually like to tell parents, okay, maybe, well, not maybe, but every parent, before, we hand out allowance, we really need to know or have certain rules of what the child should be doing with that allowance, because allowance is a teaching tool. A lot of times people think it's a gift, but it's a teaching tool. So we had a rule, and by the way, this is just our family rule. Everybody's family rules should be different. But for us, it was like, okay, here's your allowance, 50% will go into savings. And when there enough is accumulated, it will be invested. And the other 50% was going to donations and spending. And so that's like one way of kind of, just having that steady stream of income that can be put towards investing. And then obviously as they get older, they may start doing little things, for the neighbors, like maybe cutting their grass, or maybe their first pet sitting or babysitting job. I always suggest that to take a portion of that income and teach them to pay themselves first. So we usually think of pay themselves first as like saving the money, which it is. Like we need to save the money first before we need to invest it. But, teaching them that as soon as that money comes in, we don't spend it all. We actually take a portion and we pay ourselves. And that money is going to basically work for us and earn us money. And then as they get older, they get their official first part-time job, or maybe they become entrepreneurs. Or, even if some of them don't have jobs until much later on, it's instilling these habits where, whatever money that they earn on their way to adulthood, they can actually like invest a portion of it and kind of take care of themselves first before they start paying everybody else.
I love that. So it sounds like before I actually ask the how question, getting into particulars, why 50%? I know you said that that's just what your family does. And the reason why I asked this is that my daughter and I sat down, the past couple of years, we've been reading the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. And of course they say, set aside 10% of your money or more. My daughter was just like, sweet, I earn $10 a week, setting aside $1 isn't that big of a deal. And I'm like, no, let's double that or that, right? But how did you get to 50%?
So I've been doing this for 11 years. And as I said, like my kids were very little when we first started, and there really wasn't much information out there on financial literacy. There's a lot more now. I remember even like trying to find books to help parents, and there really wasn't many. There weren't that many books. So it was more like me just testing out different methods on my kids and figuring out what works for us. And then of course, that translated into me putting out content. It's like, oh, we tried this worked and this didn't. But I really think that everybody needs to decide what works best for them. And one of the things that we did was there was a suggestion out there to give kids allowance that's equivalent to their age. So let's say an 8-year-old would get $8 per week. And I know that seems like a lot, right? But if you're trying to teach your child to save and invest and donate and spend smartly, $8 doesn't really go that far, right? So it may seem like a lot, but it's not really. And I just didn't want to save 10% of $8 because I thought they're left with a lot of money to spend, and they already had a lot of toys. My kids are very blessed. We are well off, and they also get a lot of gifts. So I wanted to make it a little bit harder for them to save for a toy or whatever it is, like candy and things like that, because I think we had plenty of that at home. And so, yeah, like we decided 50%. We just felt like 50% seemed like a good number. And then I figured, when they get older, if they want to save less or invest less, then, they can scale that number down. But I get a lot of comments from some parents because sometimes some parents were like, well, you don't save 50% of your income. And there was a time when we actually did that. So, you can match whatever it is that you're doing for your household finances, or you can do something different.
I love it. It's kind of like an open book, like whatever works for you.
Yeah.
So there's the actual mechanics, right, of earning the income, earning the allowance, right? It's setting aside savings, setting aside investing. But, did you have any mindset things or conversations that you had to have with your children in order for them to really fully understand what it is you guys were trying to do and what you were trying to teach them? Like, how is that different, right? Because I don't feel like that's taught in schools, right? Like you're pushing back against society whenever you're having your children, you do this. So what came up for them and how did you overcome that?
Are we talking about like money mindset, like the abundance mindset, or just mindset over like just talking about financial literacy? Because most people don't really talk about that.
Wait, let's do both, right? Like, I guess where I'm going is like, so this is something that a conversation we had to have with our daughter like early on, and she was like, I earned $10 this week, it's mine. Like, and we walked through the various skills. That's when we introduced the various books and we read about them. She was like, okay, but there was still a mindset for her, shift that she had to make in order to realize I'm investing in my future self. And I think that's really hard for a child to pick up on, right? So yeah, let's kind of walk through mindset with financial education, but also like what's the child's experience here?
Right. So there's one big thing when it comes to kids, which is delayed gratification, right? Like very, very few of us are born with that innate sense of delayed gratification. So we have to develop it. And for many of us, I remember reading some research. I wish I could quote it right now, but I think for many of us, that doesn't happen until much later on in life. Like we're talking late 20s. And so, it's really hard to teach a child delayed gratification because, of course, they want everything now, especially if they earned and worked for that money, right? So the big thing for me, actually, and again, this is the experimenting part that I have done with my kids. When it comes to saving money, I always encourage my kids to have long-term savings and short-term savings. And the reason for that is because something that's short-term would be something that they can acquire easily in the next 2 to 3 months, so that they feel this sense of like accomplishment and gratification. And it's like, yes, I saved for that toy, I got that toy, I accomplished this goal. And it gives them that little boost so that they can continue saving or investing for the long-term goals. And when it comes to long-term goals, kids don't want to think about retirement or college, especially younger kids. And so, how do we excite them about it? So for me, what I like to do now, my kids are teenagers, and I usually like to just show them. I say, this is how much money you have in your portfolio. And then I will Google a free online compound interest calculator. And then I will just put in the amount of money that they have right now and the interest rate that they're earning. I will include the current, not the current, but the average inflation rate, which has been about 3% for the last few decades. I know right now it's high, but it wasn't this high for the last few decades. And then I would literally play around with this calculator and show them, even if you just keep this money in until you're 40 or 50. And I know that seems like a long time from now, but like you're going to have so much money, like you're going to be a millionaire and you don't have to work. Okay. Now, it's not that I'm promoting not working, but it's more like you can do whatever you want. Do you want to be an artist? Do you want to be on the beach? Do you want to, you can teach yoga, like, whatever's periodically part-time. You don't have to work as hard as some other people do. And sadly, I mean, I know and I'm sure everybody knows people that absolutely hate their jobs. Like I've been in one when I was in my 20s. I hated my job. I almost I felt like throwing up every Sunday night because I knew I had to go there on Monday, right? So kids are young, they don't get that. But when I play around with this compound interest calculator, it actually shows them how much money they're going to have if they don't touch it. So I find that really helps.
Well, that brings up a story that you told at the InvestorCon conference, and that was, I don't want to tell your story for you, but I guess I remember it was tied to an Instagram post that you had about your son and his business, and you have some pushback because your son is sitting here building a business and getting paid for leveraging his time. And then, some people were just like, wow, are you teaching him not to work? Well, I would love for you to tell that story because I thought it was such an
Yeah, sure. So it was actually kind of funny last year. We had this new neighbor, a young professional, and he ended up having he wasn't really taking care of his lawn. So his grass was getting knee high. And some of the neighbors were actually getting really upset, and they wanted to call the city on him. And I really wanted like no part of that drama. So I was kind of trying to avoid it. And then one day it just hit me. I was like, well, our kids cut our grass. Why don't they just cut his grass, and they can charge him for it? It's a great way for them to earn money and, learn certain skills. And so I talked to the kids and I said, hey guys, this is what you can do. And they seemed interested, but a little bit apprehensive because, it was kind of like they had to approach him, they had to talk to him. They didn't know how much to charge. So we actually, we live in a really nice part of town. And I know that the rates here are a little bit higher than what they are maybe in other parts of the town. But we did our research, and it was the going rate last year was $30 per lawn, 30 to 40. 40 was high end. So I was like, you know what, guys, whether you do this or somebody else, like who cuts grass professionally, it doesn't really matter. Cut grass is cut grass. Good job is good job. So why not just ask for 40? And if you have to negotiate, you can settle down on 30. But it was more like prepping them and teaching them how to talk to the neighbor, how to approach him, what to say. They say like when it comes to selling, the story sells. So it was kind of like, okay, knock on the door and say, you are already cutting our grass. Maybe, if he's interested, you can cut his grass, and you're using this money. They were actually saving up for, I forget if it was a phone or an iPad, I forget now. And you're saving this money for that. And, just tell them that you've done your research. This is the going rate. And if he pushes back, then you just do a little bit of negotiation, drop it down to 30. And so they knocked on his door, and he was so happy that they approached him, because apparently last year because of COVID, there was a shortage of labor. He couldn't get anybody to come and cut his grass, and he was too busy to do it on his own. So they got this grass cutting gig, and they would switch. Like one week, one kid would do it. Another week, another kid would do it. And then when we went on holidays, they even had their friends sub in, and we explained to them, they didn't do this, but we said, you know what, like, you can take 40 from the neighbor and pay your friend 30. It's legit. Like there's no, like some people would feel very wrong about it, but I'm like, you are the one that went out there, got the opportunity, and, your friend is still making a lot more money than they would as a minimum wage, like as a teenager. And so, but they said, no, we'll pay our friends $40. And it would take like less than an hour to cut this grass. So when I was posting about this on Instagram, I was also mentioning how some of my kids' friends, they were getting their first part-time jobs, and the minimum wage where we are is $15 per hour. And so people were getting really upset because they were saying, well, you're being rude, you're putting down people that make $15 per hour. And I was like, that's not what I was trying to do. I was just trying to change my kids' money mindset and make them understand that just because they're teenagers, they don't have to be making $15 per hour. Like they can think outside of the box. And, they didn't want to do this, but they could have gone, and knocked on other doors in the neighborhood and maybe gotten some more of these grass cutting gigs. And, that's an amazing money for somebody who is a teenager, rather than, like they put in 2 or 3 hours, let's say 3 hours, they get paid $120 rather than, working in as a cashier. Like there's nothing wrong. I don't have anything against cashiers, but it's just like thinking differently, teaching our kids that they can do these things, that they can make lots of money. They just have to do things a little bit different than what everybody else does.
I love it. I love it. Well, what are some of your favorite tools, right? You mentioned, you help your kids invest in stocks. Like, what are some of your, favorite tools, maybe books that, we can leave people with as resources as they're kind of taking their children through this journey?
So the thing is, like, I'm being very honest here, being very transparent. There's really nothing out there. That's why I have a book coming out actually in September, teaching kids about investing. It's called From Piggy Banks to Stocks. It's the ultimate guide for young investors. So for any kids ages 10 and up, where I literally break down investing and what it is in easy to understand terms. that I remember like because I had testers, people going through this book, and some parents told me, they're like, I finally understand what they're talking about on TV. So there are books, but they don't, I think, explain it. They don't explain the basics. It's almost like I feel like there's a gap. It's like nothing, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to know this, but there's nothing in between. And that's why I did that. That's why I wrote the book, and I actually have my Wealthy Kids Investment Club that helps families bridge that gap and kind of like learn step by step how to invest.
I love it. I love it. Well, what is, as we wrap up our main part of our session and give into the Ask Me Anything part of the show, what is one takeaway you want to leave listeners with today?
I really believe that every child can become a millionaire, and not millionaire in, tomorrow or 10 years from now, but we really can set up our children for success if we start investing on their behalf. And then, as our kids start earning money and have their first part-time jobs, teaching them to contribute to that investment. So it can literally be as low as $10 per week, like $500 a year. And as long as we, invest that money and have it sit for a very long period of time, like literally by the age of 40, 50, all of our kids can be millionaires. And it doesn't really take that much money or time or effort. And one other thing that I just want to throw out there, I mean, this is a whole topic in itself, and it's a big one, but this is something that I learned much later on in life. I wish I learned it earlier. Investing in ETFs and index funds for long term is absolutely wonderful. The fees are very low. There's an element of diversification, and it's really easy to learn, and you don't have to be sitting next to your computer watching stocks go up and down and like be ready to sell or anything like that. So I suggest that, if you have time, if you're interested in learning how to invest, that is something that I think anybody can learn, and it can really benefit a lot of people.
That's awesome. Yeah, we talk a lot about investing in real estate here. One of our managing partners, Fanny Randazzo, was on beginning of June, and we talked about how parents can help their children start learning real estate and investing alongside of them, either in individual real estate deals or even larger private equity deals. But again, part of diversification in the portfolio is having exposure to, various other assets like stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And, I love the fact that you introduced that it's such a simple, maybe not easy, but sliding scale for parents to kind of start off with, right? To help their children wrap their head around investing. So thank you so much for leaving us with that. Guys, if you're here live, don't go anywhere. Maya, tell us how people can get a hold of you.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a pretty active Instagram account. It's called teach.kids.money. So teach.kids.money. I finally got my blue check mark, so it's verified. Before that, there were a lot of scammers trying to impersonate me. So just make sure you follow the right account. And then I do have a Wealthy Kids Investment Club, where I help families learn more how to successfully invest. So to actually access that, you just have to go to wealthykids.club.
Awesome. Maya, again, thank you so much for spending your time with us here today and sharing your knowledge and expertise. Be here live. Don't go anywhere.